In this activity, we're going to create a simple adjustable cardboard lever system in order to be able to run some tests on it. Our learning intentions are to understand the mechanical reasoning behind the lever and to understand the manufacturing process. Our success criteria will be able to model a simple machine to be manufactured via a CAM technique, in this case laser cutting. We'll be able to manufacture and assemble a simple machine from sustainable materials, in this case recycled cardboard, and we'll be able to analyze the completed model in terms of the underpinning theory. We're going to be working in Fusion 360 and we're going to start by saving our file. So I'm going to save it in, I don't know what happened there. I'm going to save it in my mechanical systems location, and I'm just going to call it simple lever. I'm going to call it tut because it's the tutorial one, and hit save. So here we are back in Fusion 360. So we're going to start by creating or modifying something. We're going to create a parameter. So we need to go into change parameters, and we're going to create a user parameter, and this is going to be called our material thickness. Just remember, you've got to spell it right, material thickness. And I'm just going to start with a number, say 4 millimeters, because a lot of cardboard is around about the 3 to 5 millimeter mark. So I'm going to go for the middle of 4 millimeters. And I'm going to press on OK. And that is the parameter I'm going to use to set my material thickness. You can see I spelt it wrong there, so let's fix that up. And press on OK. So that's the thickness I'm going to set my material to be. And when I source my material, I can remeasure it and change that number later, and it will update throughout the entire model. So we're going to start by drawing the base. We're going to start by drawing the base with a sketch, and we're going to draw a simple rectangle. You don't have to draw a simple rectangle. You don't actually have to follow my measurements exactly. I'm just going to create a small lever for testing purposes. So let's start by going with a dimension here on this side. I'm going to make it a 60 millimeter dimension on this side, and I'm going to make it 120 millimeters wide on this side. And I'm going to try and put it in the middle. The way I like to put things in the middle is to draw a line, and I draw the line as a construction line, and I go from the midpoint, and I can go down to this point here, this midpoint here. Now that I've got that, I can use the constraints button. If you can't see this, you can often click on this, but I'm going to use the midpoint tool. I'm going to click on my line. I'm going to click on this center bit here, and that's going to put it nicely in the center, and that sketch is now resolved. I'm going to finish that sketch, and I'm going to extrude it, and my distance that I'm going to extrude it is going to be equal to the material thickness, which is 4 millimeters. I'm now going to create some uprights, and in order to do this, I'm going to go to the bottom of this item here. So I'm going to click on my little navigation tool up here. Just click on this bottom corner so that I can see the underside, and that's where I'm going to put my sketch for my uprights. I'm going to draw my sketch, my uprights, as rectangles, so R for rectangle. I'm going to have one roughly here, and I'm going to have one roughly here, and I'm going to basically have them in the rough position before I start using dimensions. I'm going to dimension this line here from this line here, and I'm just going to make it the material thickness. And I'm going to do the same from this side to this line here, material thickness. I'm going to set this distance here and here in to be, let's just say 20 millimeters. And I'm going to do the same from this side here to this side here to be 20 millimeters. This is going to be made of material, so the distance between these two lines here is going to be the material thickness. And same with this one. For the rest of it, I'm going to use constraints, and I'm going to use the horizontal vertical constraint to click on this point here and this point here to make them line up, and this point here and this point here to make those line up. I now have a resolved sketch. I'm going to finish that sketch now. I'm going to go back to my home view, and you can see that I'm going to try and need to pull those up. Before I can do that, I'm going to be able to select them, so I'm going to go back to that same view I had before. I'm going to press on the extrude button, and I'm going to extrude them, and I'm going to have to go in the negative direction. So I'm going to extrude them up. Let's just say minus 60 millimeters. But I also want them to be exactly 60 millimeters above the base, so I'm going to take away the material thickness as well, and that will put them directly 60 millimeters above. Before I click on OK, I'm going to create a new body, and I'm going to click on OK. You can now see the uprights for my lever. It's now time to create some sort of brace in order to hold these uprights nice and stable. I'm going to draw a rectangle, so I'm going to create a sketch, and I'm going to create it on one of these ends. Because I've created on one of these ends, I'm going to use the rectangle tool to create my brace. It doesn't need to go all the way up, but I will go up a fair way, and it's going to sit there like so. Notice I'm locking it to that bottom line there, so it's now stuck on that bottom line. If I then grab the midpoint tool and click on that and click on that midpoint there, that's going to lock that perfectly in the midpoint, so that when I create the dimension between this line here and this line here to be the material thickness, it's going to go perfectly in the center, which is what I want. The final thing to do is to create a distance out here, and the distance out here I'm going to make 40 millimeters. That'll be a nice solid support for that. Now that I've finished it, I'm going to resolve that sketch. I'm going to finish it, and I'm going to go back to my home view. And I now need to work with this by using the extrude tool. I can extrude this one through all the way, but the easiest way to do this is to turn my model around, choose Extent to Object, and click on that face there. It will automatically take the material all the way through. Once again, we're creating a new body, and we're going to click on OK. So we now have the basic structure of our fulcrum platform. We need to really quickly just label these bodies up so that we know which one's which. There are 4 bodies. This one's the base. We can hover over it and see that. So let's rename that BASE and press enter. This is an upright, and press enter. This is also an upright, but if we call it upright again, it will automatically put that little 1 there, which is a nice way of basically telling me that I've got 2 the same. Well, they're the same name anyway. And I'm going to call this one my brace. So there we have our brace and our uprights in place. We now need to make these components join together, and the easiest way to make these parts or bodies join together for laser cutting is to use a finger jointing system. So let's get cracking on that. We're going to start with the brace, so I'm going to turn off all of the other parts to begin with, and remembering that that is the top of the brace, I'm going to create a sketch on here. And what I need to be able to do is I need to be able to create some finger joints by cutting out some rectangles. So let's draw some rectangles, starting from the top point and going down here. Starting from this top point and going down here. I'm going to cut out a rectangle about the same here. I'm going to cut out a rectangle about the same here. And then I might cut out a rectangle here and a rectangle here. Now these aren't correctly dimensioned, so let's dimension them correctly now. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set all the thicknesses. I need to set one thickness on this side, which is going to be the material thickness. One thickness on this side, which is also going to be the material thickness. And one thickness on this side, which is also going to be the material thickness. I seem to have lost my dimension key. There. Okay, I can now use my constraint, horizontal and vertical, to click on this, and then now set the same size, this one and this one. Now set the same size, this one and this one. Now set the same size. Now I can use the dimension key to do some sizes here. So I might make this one 10. In fact, I'll make them all 10. In fact, let's just do this properly. I'll press escape here. I'm going to delete this, so I'm going to click on it and delete it. I'm going to use the equals sign. I'm going to press on this one, and this one, and this one, then this one, then this one, and this one, then this one, and this one. I'm just making them all equal to 10 so that they're all the same size. And now I just need to set out the distances, dimension between this line here and this one here. I might make that 15, and the same on this side. That's now a fully resolved sketch because it's gone black. So we can now hit finish sketch. We can now go and modify these away. Press pull. This one here, this one here, this one here, this one here, and this one here, and this one here. And if we go minus material thickness, they're gone. So I can now do the uprights. So I can turn the uprights back on. And you can see that those are through, but they haven't been cut yet. So I'm going to go modify, and I'm going to combine the thing I want to cut, which is my target body, which is my end. The tool I want to use, I need to choose cut, and I need to select keep tools and click on OK. Now if I turn the brace off, you can see that there's a hole left behind where I need it. Let's do the same. Combine this one and this one, and OK. So you can now see that we've done it on this side and on that side. So we've got the brace going right through. Finally, we need to do it the same thing to the base. Combine. This is my target. This is my tool, and click on OK. And now we'll see that the base, if I turn the brace off, has holes in it as well. Finally, we need to do the same thing for the two uprights. So let's do that now. I'm going to turn the base off, and I'm going to then draw a couple of rectangles on the end grain of this one. So let's just draw a rectangle, one here, and one here. So two rectangles. I'm now going to dimension them in from here. Let's just make it 5. In from here. Let's also make that 5. Dimension from here to here. Let's not do it that one. Let's just do it this way. Let's make the dimension of this one equal to 10. And use the equals button. The equals button, not the parallel button. The equals button there to that one there. And finally, the dimension of this line here to this one here is going to be the material thickness. And we're going to make these line up. We're going to go finish sketch. But this time around, when we modify it, we're going to use press pull on these ones. We're going to press this little button over here to turn it to this way. And we're going to choose to object all the way to here. And then press OK. Now my base still needs those cuts put in them. So I now need to use the modify tool. This is my thing that I'm going to cut. These are the tools I'm going to use. I'm going to keep them and press OK. Now if I turn the uprights and the base off, you can see that the base has got a few cuts in it. And then we've got the uprights ready to go. So we should be able to join those. And that's looking pretty good. So we're now going to create our lever arm and our fulcrum point. And we're going to do it halfway between these two things. So there's going to be like a hole that you can stick a pencil through. And you're going to be able to put that as your lever. And you'll be able to take it out and put another pencil through or move it to a different hole and so on. You'll get the drift when we do it. So let's create our lever arm first. So I'm going to draw create a midplane. The midplane is going to be halfway between this one and this one. Okay. So between those two is the midplane. I'm going to create my sketch on there and I'm going to draw a massive great big rectangle. My rectangle is going to be a dimension of, let's just say 25 mil high. Dimension of, I'm going to make it 250 long. And I'm going to draw a line here. And it's going to go from the midpoint. Where's the midpoint? Oh, wow. There it is there. I'll make a construction tool first. There it is there. And I'm going to come down to this one here. I'm going to press on the horizontal vertical tool and make that vertical. So that puts it perfectly in the middle. And now I'm going to make this a bit lower down. So let's just do a dimension from this midpoint here to this line here. And let's play around with it. Let's just try 10. That looks like it's going to be pretty good, with the exception that it's going to be pretty close to that thing there. But we can do something about that in a second. So that's my resolved sketch. I'm going to finish that sketch now. And I'm going to press on extrude. And I'm going to extrude this one. But I'm going to extrude it symmetrical. And I'm going to extrude the distance to be main material thickness divided by 2 because I'm doing it symmetrical. It needs to only go halfway each one. So now we've got our fulcrum sitting there. Let's just fix this problem here that we've created. I'm going to create a sketch on this one. I'm going to get the circle tool out, press C for circle, go to this point here, which is the midpoint. Let's just draw out a 35 mil circle and press finish sketch. And I'm going to modify that, minus material thickness, done. So that's just going to make sure that that's always clear, but I've still got the bracing capability of it. So now I'm going to put my circle on it, and I'm going to draw my circle on here. So I'm going to draw a sketch. I'm going to draw a circle, and I'm going to draw the circle somewhere here. Doesn't really matter. I'm going to set the dimensions of it to be 8 millimeters. That should get a pencil through. I'm going to line it up with this center point here, from here to here. So it's perfectly in line. And the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to press P to project. And I'm going to project this line here. Now that I've got that line, I can draw a line from there using a construction tool. From the midpoint out to this circle, press tick. And then if I make that horizontal, it's going to move that into its perfect position in the middle. And I'm going to go finish sketch. Let's look at that from our home view. We've got it on the wrong side, so I'm going to look at it from this side now. And I'm going to go extrude and I'm going to pull this all the way through to object, this side, and done. And it's gone right through the middle. So now if I were to put a pencil through that, I'd have like a seesaw. Not the best lever in the world, but I still have a seesaw. So let's put some more holes just in our lever arm. Let's actually label it now. Lever arm. So I'm going to turn everything else off. And I'm going to create a sketch on this surface here. P to project, that one there. Okay, so I've got a circle on there. I'm now going to go a rectangular pattern based on that one there. And I'm going to do this in a special kind of way. So now I've got my special pattern here. I'm going to choose the spacing. I'm going to space the distance out of those in this particular direction. Let's just try 10 and see what happens. No, 10's not going to be enough. I'm going to go 20. And I'm going to go symmetric. So there's one on either side now. And then I'm going to slowly increase my number. I think I'm going to try 25. That's better. 20 just made it a bit too close and it's going to weaken my cardboard too much. So that's how many I'm going to have. That's how many points I'm going to have. If you've done a different size, you can change around or play with the distances to get what you're comfortable with. But I'm comfortable with that. I'm now going to press on OK and finish that sketch. I'm now going to extrude each and every single one of these through. And they're going to go through negative material thickness. So if I turn everything back on now, I have exactly what I need. Now you don't have to make yours look as ugly as mine. You can square things off, you can round things off, you can make it bigger, smaller, up to you. But basically you need to have the configuration where you can move your lever from one side to the other using a pencil, just sticking it through in order to create different lever effects so that you can do different measurements with the material when we've actually printed it out or cut it out on the laser cutter. It's now time to create our sketches so that we can convert them into laser cutting files. And the way I like to do this is to create a new component. And the new component is going to be called my DXF files because I export to DXF. And in here, I'm only going to put sketches. So working on our system, we see we've got a base, two uprights that are exactly the same, so we only need to create one sketch for those, a brace, and a lever arm. So let's just turn all the others off and start with the base. I'm going to create a sketch on the base. I'm going to press P to project. And then we're going to press OK. And I'm going to finish the sketch. Down in the DXF files, I'll see some sketches. There's one sketch here, which I'm going to call base. And press enter. That is the file that I'll use to create my DXF file. I've now done that to all three of them. Remember, I only have to create one upright because they are both identical. If you've made yours slightly different in any way, shape or form, you'll need to create two. But that's not really a hassle. You can easily create as many as you need. You've still got to cut two out. So those are there and they're ready to go. And all you'll now need to do is you'll need to know what your material thickness is before you do your final export. It's time to make sure that you've got your material. So we're using cardboard, and you need to get out some vernier calipers and take some measurements. I would take 5 or 6 measurements, write them down, and then determine their average to get the measurement that you should probably use to cut your laser cut file. If you get this wrong, then it's just not going to go together. It's either going to be too tight or too loose. So it's a good idea to take a fair few measurements and get that average. I've determined mine is actually 4.2 millimeters, not 4 millimeters, so I need to go in and modify my materials. Once I modify my materials, not my materials, sorry, that's bad, modify parameters. Once I update this parameter to be 4.2 millimeters and press OK, the entire model actually increased its size according to those measurements. If you've done this right, your model shouldn't fall apart. If you've done it wrong, things will start to break. But for small measurements, it's usually fine. Just to prove my point, I'm going to go and make my material thickness to be 10 millimeters thick. And you can see now that the whole thing is really thick and chunky. And it seems to have stayed together still. And I could cut that out of like 10 millimeter acrylic or something like that, but that would be a bit of a waste for this boring looking model. Hopefully yours is looking a bit nicer than mine aesthetically, it's speaking anyway. But I'm going to go back, going to change that parameter back to 4.1 or 4.2 millimeters and click on OK. And that's the model that I'm going to go with. Now that I've done that, I can actually start exporting these sketches. They will have updated accordingly. The thickness of all the joins and everything will have upgraded all accordingly. So now I'm going to right click on there and go Save as DXF. And up will pop my Systems Engineering, my lever model, and I get to call this one Base. And hit Save. And same with this one, Save as DXF. And I'm going to call this one, what is it called? Upright. Sometimes I like to write instructions like upright cut ×2, because you need 2 of them. And right click on Brace, Save as DXF. And I'm going to call that one Brace. And right click on this one, Save as DXF. And I'm going to call that one Lever Arm. And hit Save. So those are all done. I'm ready now to take those into Adobe Illustrator for creating my final cut file. So here we are working in Adobe Illustrator. I'm going to create a new file. Mine might look a bit different to yours, but I'm going to create my new file. I'm going to call it Symple Lever. And I'm going to set the width to be a custom size, which actually matches the size of my piece of cardboard, which is actually 400 by 300 when I measure it. The maximum size we can for our laser cutter is 500 by 300. Mine just happens to be a bit shorter than that, so I'm going to press on OK. So now I've got my cardboard sitting in here, and I happen to know that my corrugations flow this way across the page. I've looked at that, so that's important to note. And I'm basically going to be working by going File, and I'm going to go Place. And I'm going to place inside this, so I'm going to go to my Year 11 Systems Engineering and my lever model, and I'm going to start with my lever arm, which is a big long thing, and hit Place. Now, if yours doesn't work the right size, I'm going to press Ctrl Z here and do that again, File, Place. If it's yours is the wrong size or it looks a bit wrong, show input options as you do it, and then go lever arm, and then go Place. And you need to make sure it's set to original size. Sometimes by default, it's going to scale it to fit the artboard. So press OK, and I'm going to whack that up there. Like I said, it's going to go across that grain. I can go File, Place, and I can place all of these at once. So brace, base, and upright, and hit place. It's going to hit me to this every single time. Okay, okay, okay. And then I'm going to place this one here, just roughly this one here, and this one here. So because I sort of want my, I want to think about the way that my corrugations are going, on this particular one here, I want to rotate it 90 degrees. If you press and hold shift, it does it nicely. So I'm going to stick that down here. I'm going to press Control or Command C and Command V and move this one in place here. And we have everything we need for our laser cut file to be working. If you want to put anything else on there, you probably want to change the color to a red or a solid blue, and that will be able to enable you to etch. But we're just going to work with black. I might grab all of these here and just use the arrow keys just to move them up, just to be a bit more efficient. And that's what I'm going to laser cut. So I'm going to go File and save that as Symple lever in here and hit save. I can now move that across to a USB, and then I can use the laser cutter to cut that out.